Aloha and good day. It's Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, and you're listening to Maui Real Estate Radio on the KAOI Radio Group, broadcasting at 11:10 a.m., 98.7 FM on the KAOI Radio Group, and you can listen to this and all shows at MauiRealEstateRadio.com. Today we're doing the interview with mayoral candidate Bissen. He has been running feverishly on the trail to get his message out there and educate everybody about what his opportunity to help Maui help itself. So we've got some questions planned today, and as always, I have my co-host Byron Yap with Axia Loans. Say hello, Byron.
Hello there. Glad to be here.
And Bissen, introduce yourself a little bit. Let's just talk story for a bit and tell us how and why you're getting started as from your long years of public service now into more public service.
Yeah, thank you, both of you, for inviting me on. So again, I'm Richard Bissen. I'm retired, 35 years with government service and public service, mostly protecting our community during that time. Also come from just a working class family, just right here in Kahului, Maui. I decided to run because it occurred to me that growing up here, I never thought that I could not live here. I never thought in the back of my mind that if I wanted to stay on Maui, it could not happen. I always assumed that and took it for granted. And I still feel that way today for myself and probably for my adult daughters. I have 3 of them. My wife and I have 3 of them. But I'm really concerned about whether the generation following my grandchildren, your grandchildren, if they have a fighting chance to remain on Maui with the way things are going. So I decided not to stay in retirement, but to come out of retirement. And I decided that I could offer my experience, my judgment, and some skills I've picked up over my career and that I've developed, and put them to use as the mayor of our county to help not only problem solve, but to collaborate with other folks in the government, the council, the directors, state and federal agencies, and
so your previous life,
come together. Yes.
You've lived on Maui your whole life and come from a large family, from my understanding, right?
Yeah, I lived in other places. Born in Honolulu, lived on military base for a few years, but been back here on Maui since 1969, 68, 69. Right. And then I went away for college in California. I also lived in Honolulu for law school and for working. I worked on the governor's cabinet there before becoming a judge. So all of it in Hawaii. I can't hear your question.
I can't. Clint, I think you're out.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry about that. It's funny, being a judge, I would assume that you'd have a few enemies, but I've talked to a lot of people, and everybody who's had experience with you has been very positive and said you were very fair, balanced, and intellectual in the process of coming to a resolution. So that, I think, speaks volumes with today's political scene. A lot of infighting and opposition, a sense of me versus you, but the ability to work together is something I think a lot of people are looking forward to.
Yeah, I've had a lot of practice making decisions, and actually not practice, real life, life-changing, real world, big decisions. And I'm glad to hear what you've heard. You don't really get immediate feedback when you work in the fields I've worked. 15 years as a prosecutor, as the first deputy attorney general, as a director of the prisons, and then of course the last 17 years as a judge. And so, yeah, you try to make the best decision you can and understand that you're dealing with people from your own community, right? These are people that you will likely see again, whether it's at Costco or, of course, the family parties that you show up at, and you realize, oh, that's so-and-so's relative's neighbor, something like that. And so, but, it shouldn't affect you. I mean, you should always try to do the right thing. I was asked once, this is a true story. Sometimes judges will have judges meetings annually, and one of the things we talk about are issues that are unique to judges. And one of them was, I live in Honolulu and I try not to go out, where I'm going to run into people. I might see somebody that I had in court. How do you do it in a small county like Maui? And I remember saying to this judge, and I had already been on the bench for over 10 years by that time. And I said, well, I try not to do anything that I would be embarrassed to see that person again.
Yeah.
And they looked at me in a kind of a puzzled look, like, what do you mean? I was like, even if it's my duty that day to send somebody to prison or separate them from their family or, have their children removed from their home, which are big, huge decisions, I do my best to explain exactly why and how we got here. And it's not about convincing somebody that you're right or they're wrong. It's just about explaining why and giving people time to absorb that and accept it or deal with it. So that's been my way of thinking as a prosecutor, as a judge. And again, because I come from such a big family and, people are impacted in real ways. So yeah, let's make our decisions where you're not afraid to run into somebody again.
So I'm going to start off with my first question being later on, as just because I think it's a good segue with people in prosecution and a lot of people that get involved into the system is, I think everywhere across the nation we're having just unreasonable numbers of homeless people and mentally ill throughout Hawaii and the US. And there's no quick and easy solution. Obviously, I think I'm a very much a strong supporter of housing first, because until you can put people in a stable environment, you can't really help them out, regardless of what program they're in. They got to make sure they feel safe. But what would you propose, or how do you view the housing crisis right now, especially for Maui County, and getting additional services for Maui's homeless and mentally ill?
Well, maybe I'll come at this from the reverse order that you just gave it, because I think it might be quicker to say it this way. I think it's ambitious to try to end homelessness. I think what we should try to at least do is to manage the best we can. And I think when we come up with solutions, while I agree with the housing first policy, I think that's a long-term goal. And I think with any problem that we face, we should have immediate, intermediate, and long-term solutions. I think we get stuck sometimes that we're only looking at one solution and we're maybe passing on other things. So, for example, if I tell you that I think the best way to end homelessness is to give everybody a home.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that makes sense, right? Somebody has a home, they're not homeless, but where do they go while they're waiting for that? And if the answer is affordable housing, okay, that's great. A young family is waiting for their home to be built. What do they do in the meantime? So that's the immediate and intermediate steps that I think have to be in place in any situation, not just these two that we're talking about. So when it comes to housing, our immediate way to address housing is ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. It's something that other cities like ours, the size of Maui and Maui County, also face. Every council throughout the state, my understanding, has approved a version of accessory dwelling units. And depending on the size of your lot, you can have one or more. So these are already allowed. The Bissen administration, we hope to approve 100 of these ADUs in the first 180 days, the first 6 months of our administration. And the way we're going to do that is we are going to propose 3 floor plans, a studio, a 1-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom. We're going to run those past those departments that require permitting review, and ask them, is there any problem with the design of this house? Is there any issues with the location of the bathroom or the doors or what have you? And once those are pre-approved, if you come in from the county and your lot, is eligible, and as long as, I have to make one caveat, as long as you're hooking up to the county sewer and the county water. Yeah. If you're hooking up to a cesspool, it will require an additional review because of the capacity, of course. So assuming those things, it's our vision that would be approved, because really the only thing you need to do is get your permit, and then you can start as an owner builder or contractor. And what I'm hoping this would do is also help our industry, our trades industry, where we could have contractors who might be ready to do these kinds of projects, just be specialized in ADUs. Now, we could, of course, have more than 3, but we would start with that. And, with the help of architects, contractors, we could come up with other designs that are popular. Now, if you want to customize yours, then, of course, you would be like anybody else seeking a permit. But what I'm trying to do is to be more efficient. And again, to me, this is the quickest and cheapest way to address, affordable housing on Maui, is to have ADUs. The second is, of course, the intermediate step I would propose is to revitalize and repurpose vacant commercial space. Specifically, I'm talking about Sears, Sports Authority, Safeway in Kahului next to Ross's, the old DMV, Lowe's, the old Lowe's, places that are already built. They've already have a carbon, footprint, if you will. They have water, they have sewer, they have parking, and we have a need. We don't need stores so much. We need housing. Our society has changed with people ordering from Amazon and other sort of mail orders. Most people have their goods, their boxes waiting outside their homes when they come home at the end of the day. So brick and mortar, not so much. And every shopping mall in the country is facing this issue right now. And so they are all repurposing in some ways. Take the Ala Moana shopping center, for example. If they had a school there, it would be an exact self-contained town. If they had a school in that mall, they have housing, they have all the stores, restaurants. So I think we could do that to revitalize these areas.
I think
so
that's
that would be an
smart move.
intermediate. Yeah.
One of the things that I looked into my research on the subject is, you can't just basically create normal housing infrastructure, like, make them apartment units, but especially for, community bathrooms and living quarters for transitional housing, it makes a ton of sense. Because the cost of renovating those places in a lot of situations, like office space in skyscrapers or commercial buildings, are running upwards of $1,000 a square foot, which is, basically above the cost of just building from scratch. But I really do like, the diversification of use. And since there's such a demand and need for transitional housing, I mean, it far outstrips almost any other demand that's out there. And then, of course, having counterpart to that, more commercial / residential living, so that, in a separate area, so that people can live, work in a community, as opposed to everybody having to commute right now.
Yeah, I think it solves a lot of our issues. You just mentioned parking and traffic and all of that. I think what you really do, though, is you end up revitalizing your community. You revitalize an otherwise, a place that's kind of sore on the eyes, if you will, and not being, I don't know about the cost, but, I think when you look at what's available to develop, especially on Maui, I think that sort of has to be included in the equation, because, what else are you going to do? Where else are you going to build? So I think, people will be creative, they'll be innovative. It's not your standard project, but I think the potential, not only to develop housing, which I think should be the #1 reason to do it, but also to revitalize that community. Like you talk about the live and work situation. These are not new concepts. These are actually old concepts. When a store owner would live above this store, a restaurant owner lives above this restaurant. Yeah, we're just adding, or even Old Town Hawaii, but we're just adding more floors. And the reason that's a mutual and maybe even symbiotic relationship is your customers come from those who live above, your workforce comes from those who live above. And it's perfect for mixed use. When you think about a downsized, smaller place, maybe seniors who don't, kupuna, who don't want to maintain a large property anymore, might want the ease of a smaller apartment style living, brand new couples or single folks that want a place to start, their entry home. Again, near to stores for seniors. You want it to be near the MEO vans, the MEO routes, get to the doctors, get to your prescriptions. And then that's when you have those places that we still go to, like the barber or the nail salon or the dentist or the optometrist, all sorts of things.
So last time we spoke about that very topic, I asked two questions and combined them into one. And you were very poignant to point out that there's a big difference between homeless and mentally ill. So, on the other side of the equation, mentally ill, how would you help support that community? Because it's an ongoing issue that, does affect both the average person who's housed and unhoused.
Well, starting with the mentally ill on Maui, it's easy to answer, well, that's a state issue. It's the state that runs the Hawaii State Hospital and provides, the level of care. But the county also participates through grants with nonprofits and other organizations like Mental Health Kokua that we have here. So, the county can play a very big role by funding nonprofits who do the type of work that the county would not be qualified or able to do. I think
funding
that
is the most important part.
Right. But I think, we're seeing some of this play out right now for those folks that work for Kaiser that have been on strike for the last couple of weeks up in the Kahului area across Baldwin. They're talking about having so much work and being, having too many cases per worker. So, it tells us there's a shortage of people working in the field. But the mental health issues are very individual. The experience that I saw a lot of as the mental health court judge and becoming very intimately familiar with a lot of our population is when people start to feel better, they stop taking their medication because they think they're cured. They don't realize or make the connection that that's the only reason they're feeling that way. So we're always having to convince people, whether I think what works a lot is the long-term injection medication. There's some where people were taking a pill every day to keep themselves better, or even a shot once a week. I think there's one out there now for at least a month and maybe longer term. We find those to be very, very effective for our population. But I think what we started to do and what I would like to see more of, and I think the county could play a role in this, is to have mentors. I think people who go through the mental health court system are unlike people who go through the criminal justice system. Their reality and their life challenges are very different. But because they've overcome them, I feel like they could be very, very useful to help because they know where they're at. A lot of the best drug counselors are former drug users. So mental health court patients who have overcome their issue, although still still involved in their treatment, would be the perfect people to convince folks that are going through their own struggles how to get through to the other side. So I think that's something the county maybe could have not a policy, but could promote that.
And petition the state for more funds too, because
of course,
my mom was on the mental health board of Maui over a decade ago. And it was several years of really hard work petitioning for income and being one of those individual volunteers to bring awareness for both locals and state on our just desperate need. And it was hard several years ago. They moved the Kiki ward over to Honolulu. So there's a lot of youth that suffer from mental illness. And now if they have a need for overnight stays, they're often over on Oahu away from family and friends. So having a facility here would be a great help. But, problems with zoning and creating a facility like that is just one of many issues, let alone the funding part. So.
Well, our facilities here on Maui, like the Molokini ward, are only designed for 10 days or less. And they're only designed for acute care and short term. So we either don't have the population to support a full-fledged mental health feature, or there's no there's no political will to have
Or
that happen.
I don't know if this is required, but I would assume a certificate of need is, in order to build a mental institution, would be required. Get rid of the certificate of need, that would be great.
Well, you still would need the professionals.
Yeah.
You would need the doctors and the staff. There's a lot of security required at certain
Undoubtedly.
stages that people are at in their as they're going through their mania or whatever it is, the manic phases that they might be going through. So it's not something that anyone can just step in on. They're very unique.
One of the things that kind of the headlines right now that I saw the other day, and maybe you might have thoughts on this, is, we just saw what in Oahu and now on Maui corruption, where bids are being paid through government employees, and always the concern is, as the citizens, is, hey, is our mayor or is going to try to do anything? We know you can't see everything, but do you have a plan in place or thoughts on this? What's happening?
Absolutely. And, I think we can talk more candidly about it now that both gentlemen yesterday pled guilty to their charges and to their offenses and will be sentenced in January and facing very severe, consequences. And, the message is clear to anyone who would think of this or have been involved in this to really think twice. I'm probably one of the few candidates who've ever run for an office who's actually been involved in either the prosecution or sentencing of folks who have taken from the taxpayers. But I will say that while it appears that there is a system in place, it didn't work. The system they had didn't work. So I would require that if a sole source bid, which just to explain to your listeners, it involves someone who's deemed to be the only vendor who can provide that service or equipment. I think everyone would understand that for something of this magnitude, nearly $20 million, you would think that there would be other companies that would say, hey, is that, profitable? I think, I'd be interested in exploring or getting into that field. But, I don't know that did or did not happen in this case. So one of the things I would do is I would frown very much on sole source contracts or bidding, but I would make sure that we have a process in place that not only must the director sign off, but for me, I would involve the director of finance. And in some instances, if it's over a certain amount, let's say, I don't know, $100,000, that it also get the mayor's signature or at least the managing director.
Yeah, it'd be nice too, maybe.
Yeah.
If you had something where, as a community, we can see, like if a bid's awarded, hey, this is the sole source bidder. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes, of course. Yeah, no, I think that the taxpayer wants to know that the money that they're paying to their government is being used wisely and not being handed out to friends or family. But again, I think the more eyes on the project, the more eyes on we don't have a procurement office in the county level like the state does, is my understanding. So, not only should we rely on the integrity of our employees and our appointees, but we should have systems in place that require a more set of eyes on that. So the person knows, hey, I can only run this up the chain, and the next person says, well, I'm going to look at it. If it stops at that level, then boom, it turns around, nothing's granted or approved. But if it says, hey, you know what, we checked everything and this looks like it's legitimate. The thing about a sole source bid is we got to be very careful about any change orders that can come in after the fact, because change orders are something that aren't reviewed as closely as the original bid, because you think, wow, this bid is the only one, so we had to take it, or it's so low, it's the best one. And then just to come around again and just kind of get a nickel and dime here and there. So I think,
from my understanding of the audit of the rail over on Oahu, that's where the majority of their cost overruns are coming from, is how the contract was written on like earth movement or something along those lines. And a lot of dirt getting pushed around for no particular reason other than to cost money.
And no one's really surprised to learn of this after the fact. The question that Byron asks is, what can you do before that happens?
Yeah.
And again, I think the way to do it is to be very cautious on sole source. The government or the taxpayer does not like that. So make sure that it's legitimate, that is the case. It's the only one. But then have a set of eyes on there and just have it go up the responsibility so that it goes perhaps even to the mayor for signature. So everybody's involved in the decision making, everybody's aware. And again, I think we got to pay real close attention to any change orders that come in on this, especially sole source bids throughout the process. And we need to have a zero tolerance on change orders unless they're signed off.
So on the other side, obviously, this is a real estate show and housing is one of our #1 focus points. I kind of want to combine two questions here. And one is, looking to the past, like Dream City. I mean, back in the day, there were, workforce housing projects like Dream City. And I'm wondering about creating additional programs where if somebody comes through, they can fast track a process, which some fast tracking does exist already. But if somebody's willing to, live in a property for 10 years, they're not going to be able to sell it until after that point. Really only applies for residents and people who are going to be here full time and can't sell unless there's, something under duress like death or divorce. And then to me, more importantly, is Maui County has just completely gone away from issuing bonds for major improvements. I see so many times at county council talking and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to let the developers slide on this one and we're not going to require them to put in the improvements into the roads. And I'm like, it's not their responsibility. It should be the county's responsibility to issue a bond for those improvements, and reduce traffic, have sidewalks, things of those natures. Those capital improvements get paid for by the new taxes in the area. So I wanted to kind of get your opinion on the past and present situation for creating workforce housing and just housing in general for large projects.
Can I just answer? I agree, because it sounds like you worked the answer into your question.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways,
Yeah.
which means because I absolutely have been saying since I started my campaign that I think the way we drive prices down, this is the way I describe it. How do we drive prices down? Well, the county putting in infrastructure is one of those huge ways. The county owning the land is another feature. Of course, I've long proposed an inventory of our lands. I don't think we need to wait until a developer comes to us and says, oh, I have this tract of land in this area. I wanted to know if I could develop it. I don't know why. And somebody can probably explain this to me one day, but I don't know why we cannot today already point out areas that we think should not be developed. Should not be. I'm guessing there are lots of people that already know those areas. I'm not even, regardless of who the owner is, we might own it, it might be owned privately. But I think if we had an idea of areas where we could take our time right now and say, the available land on Maui is a static number. It doesn't change week to week, year to year. It's been the same for generations. What I think we should do to save time, energy, money, and mostly the cost to eventually the home buyer is to already set out those areas that we have no controversy, areas that we have lots of controversy, and the areas that are in the middle. And then we can maybe even promote those areas as the county. We can say, hey, we looked up our tax records and this land is owned by this hui or this family. Are you interested in having someone purchase, trade, swap, donate? And this is someplace we can start putting in land. You know what I don't know the answer to is who's responsible for building housing in Maui? Who's responsible for that? Is it the developer? Is it the county? Is it the state? I think the answer to that lies in, well, who controls the restriction? Who controls the decision? Who has the say? I think it's the county. I think it's the county who gets to say. So if you're going to say, well, I decide if you can or cannot build or what you must do, then my guess is you're responsible for building it there. Because while you need help and you need contractors and people to build it, they can't make a move unless you give them the okay.
Yeah.
So I think, if the county wants to do inventory of lands, wants to use county or state lands, if the county wants to put in infrastructure, I think the only issue I've brought up that might be a discussion point is requiring that you have a homeowner's exemption to buy that area. I've gotten different reactions from people on this. I'm curious if I get into office, putting a full court press of corporation counsel attorneys on researching and focusing on this. I've had people come up to me and say to me at meet and greets, you can't do that. You can't restrict what I can buy. So I ask them,
you can't be forward thinking. Don't be forward thinking. We just got to be shooting from the hip. Come on.
well, I asked them a question. I said, and this was a non-native Hawaiian person. So I said to them, can you buy a house on Hawaiian homelands? And she said to me, no. I said, why? I thought nobody could restrict you from buying property or land. I said, can you buy an affordable house in an affordable housing project if you don't meet the criteria? She goes, no. I said, well, I thought you said you could buy. We already restrict purchasers.
Yeah.
Already. I don't know if this is a category that would be recognized and allowed, but I don't see the harm in trying, because the good in it, the benefit in it is that folks who have put in their sweat equity living here, paying taxes, cleaning up the beach, coaching their kids in school, coaching other people's kids in soccer and baseball. And when I say equity, I don't mean that in a realtor sense. I mean that in contributing to your community. You should have every opportunity to own a home or at least lease a property here for all of that. That's got to count for something. And so I feel like, if you have that homeowner's exemption, we build homes in subdivisions that I'm calling kama'aina housing, where the focus is on who is living in the house, not on how much the house is worth. Now, when people talk about affordable housing, I wasn't trying to mock that term when I said there's no such thing, because, it's not true. It's not affordable to most people. What I was trying to distinguish is when you say affordable housing, the focus is on the cost of the house, the price of the house. When you say kama'aina housing, the focus is where I want it to be on, is who's living in the house. Tell me this, gentlemen, if you build a 500 home affordable housing project and you sell 450 to somebody who's here from the mainland, what have you done? What have you done for the market here? I mean, I'm just saying,
you just
right?
Brought in more traffic.
Well, all you did was sell an affordable house. And I feel like we're focusing on the wrong statistic, or we're measuring the wrong thing. Everybody likes to take credit, or maybe not everybody, a certain group of people like to take credit or pat themselves on the back. I made all these affordable housing. Yeah, well, who's living in those? Just tell me who's living in them. That's all I want to know. If you can tell me that, there's 75% local people, 80%, that's great. Then why do we have this problem? If that's the case, why are so many people moving? Why are people, and who's moving? Who's moving away? Our middle class. Who's moving away? The people that are contributing to our community, right? People police officers, firefighters, nurses, teachers, tradespeople, right? People that contribute, the recognized middle class of our community, the ones who can actually afford a house if we offered them one to buy, if we built one for them to purchase. So I just think, and we can think about other alternatives, which I'm becoming a fan of leasehold. And I think for a couple of reasons. When we look at the Hawaiian Homes model, those lands will live on forever as kama'aina, in that case,
And that's what we
Hawaiians.
did. We created or helped fund and started out in the Halio Maui, which is a community land trust. So it basically goes into perpetuity affordable housing, where Nahalio Maui goes around and purchases, foreclosed or builds properties, and it's a shared ownership. And the best part is the majority of those buyers actually trade into the open market. It's a wonderful opportunity to build equity, savings, and credit simultaneously while learning how to take care of a properry. And obviously,
holding on to that property.
Everything need to be Hawaiian homelands or Nahalio Maui.
No.
Yeah, it's
the
definitely
model.
a function of the economy. You need different sectors of housing in order to allow the average person to flourish and grow and become a member. And that includes home ownership. Home ownership is a necessary function of saving for the future. And without those vehicles and prices skyrocketing, what else are you going to do?
We call that, in our campaign, we call that Kama'aina prosperity, which sums up our entire campaign. And exactly for the reason you just stated. Leasehold is just one form of ownership. It's not the only way. But just like you offer AMI to 50% to 80%, 80% to 120, 120, just like you offer that, is the same way you offer the ability. And I'll tell
my
you
favorite
why.
thing about that whole Nahalio Maui is the revolving board, because so many times you see companies and nonprofits evolve into, the main person getting a lot of money for their position, where it really, it's important that people get paid for the work that they do, but it's more important that, it does not divulge into sucking up resources. So I love how Nahalio Maui works as a revolving board. So people get the opportunity to help, learn, and then contribute to the community,
Right. No, I agree. And I do think that the reason I'm a proponent of leasehold property, and I've become that, is most people today can afford their mortgage or their rent. It's the down payment that kills people or prevents them from trying to get into homes. So a leasehold property at least resolves some of that. And again, like Hawaiian homelands, those properties would remain in the local market, most likely, because investors are less likely to invest into a leasehold property. So you get people in cheaper, you get people in quicker. Now, of course, they don't own the land, but think about any of us, whatever home you live in now, you're just the caretaker of that property during your lifetime. When we're gone, somebody else lives in that house, just like a leasehold. You can't tell the difference between a leasehold and a fee simple by the person living in it. Really, everything we're here, we're just on borrowed time. I mean, we're all leasing. I mean, we can call it fee simple because we can transfer it and leave it for somebody else, of course. But if we're talking about preventing Maui from being oversold or having Kama'aina be less and less and less here, then leasehold is one of those methods or solutions, just like rentals are, just like rentals. Not everybody can afford to buy. We need to offer rentals. So, when you go in a restaurant, you offer people the whole menu. You don't just say you can only eat this, right? Because people can afford and their appetite is different. So
now with your, if you do get in office, what is your thoughts? Because there's been a lot of complaints about we have all of our eggs or most of our eggs in the basket of tourists. Is your administration prepared to search out and look for diversification of our economy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we already are. And we have evolved into this dependency on tourism, and there's lots of revenue generated by this, and a lot of people on Maui. I mean, the odds are you have a 50-50 chance of running into somebody who's making money off of the tourism industry. So not something for us to simply cast aside. That would be very poor governance and poor leadership to sort of kill the golden goose that's laying the eggs. However, we also witnessed during the pandemic some of the downside to that dependency. And so clearly, I think it was obvious before that, but it was driven home during that time. So yes, we have some ideas of expanding industry. I've talked a lot about, I'm just going to say it and not explain a lot, access deer. I think that's a huge issue. It's an environmental threat. It's an invasive species, but it's also an agricultural product that, believe it or not, you do not have to feed or water. You need to harvest. All one needs to do is harvest it. And if we can work on having the USDA have a permanent inspector here, and we could have a mobile slaughterhouse, whether the county, helps to fund that or not, that's an industry. If we can workforce develop our butchers, our processors, our manufacturers, or distributors, people would buy that product. We could put a bounty on it and have hunters, turn them into, certain places that are regulated. I mean, there's a lot of challenge, and I know there's ongoing task forces that address it. But right now, the main issue is eradication. But I feel like it's a missed opportunity for an industry, because I agree with the eradication part, but what do we do with it once it's been dispatched and harvested? I feel like we can focus on that. We should focus on it right now, because that's necessary. Artificial intelligence is another area that we're talking about. We actually have a project on Maui now with the University of Hawaii, Maui College, and some other universities, namely San Diego, that is working on driverless electric vehicles. And I would love to have that be beta tested right in Kihei on South Kihei Road, where we could have much like an Uber and a combined Uber and bus, if you will, be on a preset route, be as small as a 2-seater, as much as an 8 or 10-seater, much safer, having no driver, because we can all remember stories of Uber, Lyft, situations going bad, either because of the driver or the passenger. We could reduce emissions, reduce traffic, and much cleaner. And we could do this here on Maui. The technology is already here. It's already being worked on. Our
Full
team,
self-driving gets released this next week. So, and it's kind of funny, if you look at the numbers for the rail over on Oahu, it basically, I think it pays for a Model 3 for almost every resident of Oahu. the amount of taxes that got
don't forget,
spent
we're
on
paying for that too.
infrastructure.
We're paying for that too.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
affecting all of us. Yeah. So, I mean, that's an industry that I think we could, develop at the Research Technology Park. We could do not only the artificial intelligence part of it, but also the manufacturing of it would be great if that's something we got ahead of. Our team of folks here, did their driving in Indianapolis a year ago in the Indianapolis Speedway, and came in 6th in the country among universities. So we're there competing right now during this time. And so it's not a hypothetical. It's something that we already have people working on. And if we could expand that area, of course, a lot of folks talk about agriculture as being something, food sovereignty, food security, whichever word you want to use, as a way of expanding our economy. I think most of that is so that we can be self-sufficient and sustainable. I'm not sure if we're talking about growing food to sell outside of here, like sugar or pineapple, but something more of, not being so reliant. I don't know that helps to diversify or replace an economy like tourism, or if it just simply helps to supplement and sustain us during periods of not having food delivered. So those are just a few of the ideas, and I know there will be many others talked about.
What I'm hearing, correct if I'm wrong here, is I'm hearing that from you, you're if you are mayor, is you're open to ideas. Nothing is set in stone, meaning, hey, it's black or white, Byron, don't even bother me. Is your administration going to be open to the average person? Of course, we don't want to bother you every day, or, hey, my idea is the best idea, but it sounds like you guys are open, or you're open to ideas. They may work, they may not, but hey, I'm willing to listen. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%.
Great. Clint?
And if I can prove this point, last week we were in Kula on a Wednesday. We were in Makawa on Thursday. And we started what we're calling our Collective Kuleana series, going to the public. And this was, and I guess a social experiment. We're going to be in Lahaina on Thursday and encourage people to come. What we're doing is we're asking the community, well, we have some ideas of what we think the issues in Kula are. Nobody knows the Kula issues better than the people living in Kula. And I was a little surprised by a couple of the topics that were concerning to them. I thought I knew what they were going to be. But again, to go to the community, to have average people, and when I say average, I mean everyday people. I mean, they're all above average in terms of, intellect and everything else. So I'm just saying, people who were not expecting to speak up, break into groups, talk about the issues and their solutions. And it was even more passionate the next night in Makawao, where we had, I think, 15 people sign up for, on our website, and 70 people show up, and some of them had heard how Kula went. So we have facilitators, and we're there listening. So we're not waiting until January. We're talking to people right now, giving them a glimpse of what it would look like for our administration. I have said it before. I'm sure I'm on record. It's my intent to go to communities at least once a month, holding like a town meeting. So maybe go to Kihei, in 1 month. The next month go to Haiku. The next month go to Paia or Kula. Go to the community centers and just say, hey, what's going on? What can we talk about? I mean, we set out some ground rules. Yeah, it's not a gripe session. It's not a grumble section. It's not a session. It's an opportunity to really share, listen, and be heard. The word that I think comes to mind that we've gotten away from, and I would like us to try to get back to, is respect. And respect comes from listening to other people, allowing other people to have an opinion that's different from yours. Not judging people, not thinking you have the moral high ground because you think this, or you don't because you think that. It's become allowable for people to be rude, or for people to be obnoxious, or for people to be so right in their opinion that no one else's opinion matters or is right. And not only is your idea bad, but you're a bad person too. There's so much attached to that. And, no one has seen more adversarial stuff than a judge or a prosecutor. I'll tell you right now. I mean, politics is it's got its own thing, I'm finding out too. But I'm going to say on a day-to-day where there's usually rules, but, a lot of aggressive, adversarial stuff go on is in a courtroom. And so, when I'm out, my goal is that we can agree to disagree, but, we don't have to be disrespectful. And
I bet you've had your taste of the plutocratic regime, that's everywhere all the time. But, that being said, we do have a lot of laws and county ordinances in place and processes that aren't very smooth here. I mean, from my understanding and reading, Maui County is literally one of the most difficult places to develop anywhere across the United States, which is why I think having a county initiative for building affordable housing makes a ton of sense, like you were saying. But what is your thoughts on helping smooth out the permitting process? Because, last time we spoke, we talked about Maui Meadows, and that's a half acre. And while it should be allowed to have a third dwelling, a lot of people have run up against issues there. And later after that last communication, I learned that actually some people have been able to get to third because, while they created the county rule, that's state zoning up there because it's rural, half acre, they should be allowed to do the second accessory dwelling. They've worked out the kinks, but nobody up in Maui Meadows realizes they can put that next dwelling unit. So I think it has to be two-part. Educating people that they can do an additional accessory dwelling, giving them, an opportunity to do that. And how exactly do we smooth out the permitting process to make it capable?
Is Maui Meadows, can you help me with this? Are they still on cesspool, or have they gone to
Depends.
county?
There has been a lot of people who have converted to septic. But yes, it's cess and septic. It's not sewer.
That could be one of the challenges of having that third dwelling, to be honest
Absolutely.
with you, because it's not just the zoning. It's not just, that you have to have the capacity to handle, the waste. And that's, so it's not just the size of the lot. It's not just having a half acre lot. It's, where's the, because you're going to add more stress to the capacity of your cesspool or septic. And so, if people are willing to, increase their capacity, then I suppose those are the ones that got the third dwelling. But so I don't think it's just simply the county overregulated, which, the county is been proven, or at least written about, that we're the most, you know, overregulated county in the state and possibly the country. But
In the country.
I think, yeah, I think in fairness to folks who have to review requests in Maui Meadows before everybody runs out and tries to get a third dwelling, they really gotta. And I said this earlier when I was talking about getting 100 ADUs, you know, approved in the first 180 days. I made the caveat, assuming you're on the county sewer system. So I know that's something that, you know, is a sore subject for a lot of people, and you know has to be discussed. A lot of things in their time were legal. I mean, before you could paint with asbestos, right? I mean, you could have asbestos or lead paint, and you could have asbestos. It wasn't, we didn't know about it like we do now. So there are things that have changed and hopefully improved and make it healthier for people, but it's also a hassle. And so there's a little bit of a trade-off, but I would say that the regulation, you know, a lot of that does come from the council. So I think it would take a strong mayor to work with the council to try to make your case. And I think it'll have to be a very compelling case that the need for housing is at a critical stage. You know, I think ironically, if I can say this without offending anyone, ironically, the very thing I think that folks have been trying to protect against has backfired with some of the overregulation, because now what we're finding is local people cannot buy a home and have to leave, and people who have money and means that come from outside can buy in this market because the inventory is so small that the prices are so high. I mean, I'm talking to the realtors. I don't know what I'm talking about. You guys know all this stuff, but so who ends up being able to afford that house, ironically, is the person that is not from here.
Yeah.
And the people from here are the ones that aren't finding any homes available. And, you know, this isn't about, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, I got it, you can do it. And just all you got to do is, you know, I can. But, you know, it's way more than that. I mean, the numbers just work against people. I talked about the down payment issue. You know, the monthly payment is an issue too, but more so than the monthly cost of your housing. Most people's housing are fixed numbers once they get into a long-term rental agreement or they have a mortgage payment for 15, 20, 30 years. But it's the cost of living, the cost for your gas, the cost for your cell phone, for your internet, for your groceries. Those things can change weekly. How much you paid for a gallon of milk last week and how much it costs this week can change. Again, your cost of your housing usually stays somewhat stable, but it's the other costs that drive up and where people have to decide, do I fill my prescription or do I fill my gas tank? What do I do?
So my last question as we get nearing the end of this conversation is, becoming mayor, you're in, what is your attack or your first 100 days going to look like from me, you know, when you get into office, or what can we expect?
Well, clearly we want to put together the best cabinet we can. So we want to have, you know, people, we want interested and qualified and eligible people to put their names in. So we want to do a strong recruiting push. I get asked this question maybe once a week, you know, who are you going to appoint? Who's your cabinet? I said, well, who applied? And of course they can't tell me because no one's applied. So I have no idea who will be interested in working, but, you know, my goal will be to find the most qualified people that are committed to our people, you know, here on Maui that want to help our people. And that's going to probably be my biggest focus, because that's going to determine how the rest of the, you know, 3 years and 264 days go. Because
you hear that, people? You need to volunteer and you need to sign up for the job. You know, there's opportunity to help out there. You know, how would people apply for a job like that? They go to the county website.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a personnel office that accepts the county's, you know, applications. But, you know, I'm pretty sure if we're successful, you know, there's a window between November 8th and the first week in January for, you know, us to get information out to people. But yeah, I want to put a couple of committees together I also want to run some of this by the council once we know who the council is, because the council now, since 2018, has a say in who the mayor gets to select for their cabinet. That's different than what I had grown up on, and as a former director who had to go through council approval under two different mayors as prosecutor. Just the prosecutor and the corporation council needed to go through that. Now every director that the mayor appoints has to go through that. That's that's a little cumbersome, and that's an interesting approach, I think, and I have an opinion on that, but I won't get into it right now.
I like your 180 days though with the accessory dwelling units. What else are you thinking in that first 100 days?
Well, yeah, it's housing is the main thing. I really want to step up this access to the issue because I think it's going to come up on us quicker than we realize. And again, it could be irreversible if they can get to our watershed and denude our watershed area. So I'm really concerned. And speaking of water, depending again on what happens on the charter amendments, I think for me, I'd like to have people from each of the three major water sources, the Navai Eha, the East Maui water folks, and the West Maui or the Komohana water district. I'd like to have a couple of people from each of those areas that are very knowledgeable advise me on water issues. I'd like to have that start sooner than later. I don't think we need to wait until there's a crisis to start talking about these things. I'd like to try to prevent that. And the way I'd want to do that is have these folks monitor our usage. Is water being divided up the way the CWRM has agreed or has authorized? Are people getting their water to their lo'i, to their farms, to their where it's supposed to be? And if not, why not? What does it look like? What's our yields? Does it look like we're going to come up on something we need to do something right away? And I feel like we need to put in more water catchments. I think, especially for the South Maui Kihei area, who, what we're noticing in our patterns, and I'm guessing this is because of climate change, that we're not getting that steady sort of rain that we used to have. Now we just get dumps. We get a rain dump. So even, rain is different than what it used to be for us. But that's also an opportunity for us to, acquire resources. So what are we doing? How prepared are we? I think allowing more water catchments, more water reservoirs, trying to catch the water up the mountain before it gets all the way down and becomes brown water in our oceans. I mean, there are things that I don't think we can wait on. I want us to really jump into our digital equity, our broadband access and equipment for our rural communities, Molokai, Lanai, Hana, out in Haiku, wherever there's access issues. There's a lot of federal government money that has been coming in the last few years, and some of it is designated for infrastructure and water and sewer and wastewater, and of course, broadband and digital, access and equity and equality. So I'd like us to take more advantage of getting those grant monies to Maui, and increasing that for our citizens, just to name a few.
So I wanted to wrap it up with a final question. And one of the things that I've been seeing in the last, basically through COVID, is, the people of Maui, as well as, people who own off island, seem to be getting an unfair tax burden comparative to some of the hotels. And it happens kind of in two ways. Taxes went up for, people who own homes that are in, that have automatically pushed up because of prices exponentially increasing. So they've had tiered expenses increase, on their tax basis. And in addition to that, their assessment levels are dramatically higher compared to what hotels pay on a per square footage basis. So, it's, to me, frustrating to see people that have, a condo that is either a primary residence or, a locally owned rental, that their tax basis is not only significantly higher than what the hotel is, but on their per square footage basis, they're paying way more compared to the hotel, because even though, something like the Grand Wailea sells for $1 billion+, on their per square footage tax basis, it's so much less comparatively. I mean, I see an opportunity to level the playing field a little bit more, because when you have people visit, they generally get more of an understanding of Maui when they're here for a longer period of time, and they stay in condo units compared to the hotels, which is usually here for a dramatically shorter period of time. And they have multiple layers to harvest cash from these visitors, because they have restaurants, and more turnover by comparison. So I'm kind of surprised I haven't seen a correction, because hotels got tax breaks while, the local property taxes have gone up.
I think I'm getting your question from that. I think the council tries to, I guess, influence people's behavior. And one way to do that is through taxation. One way to do that is to say, we don't want more short term, we want more long term. So I suppose you could say that they're influencing, or some might say punishing, people for the short term in trying to direct them into perhaps going into more long term, because that's where the need is. In fairness, that's where we need housing. I think the way to influence the way the council sets the tax rates is to vote for council members that you want to do, who see it the way you do. It's not really the mayor's function. It's not, according to the charter. The mayor can propose, yeah, of course, and the mayor can try to sit with council members, or at least a majority of them, and say, we should consider this for these reasons. It's funny, because when you talk to the hotel association, they see it a little different. They feel like they're getting taxed quite unfairly and quite high, and they have their statistics that they can pull up and show this is how much we're contributing. Now, I think when they use those statistics, they are including the short-term rental market in that, by the way, too. But I think, I think the only way to address tax rate, which is really what this question is about, is to speak out at council hearings and meetings, to share your views, and to vote for people that you think support your views of it.
I think that's a very proper point to make, because and people have to be involved. I really love the Blue Jeans process. It is kind of hard, though, when you go to county council and they're taking these tiered systems and higher tax rates into consideration, and it is unanimous in there that the tax rates and systems are changed to a different level than they're suggesting, and the only person that's for it is the hotel lobby when testifying, and you have a variety of opinions that saying, oh no, it should be way more, and it goes and comes to the vote, and nobody has listened to a single one of the testimonies that are in there. So I think you're right. Basically voting is the most important part, so that taxation is properly represented by both, the people and owners of Hawaii, as opposed to, the larger corporations. So I think that's right.
So that's what I tell people anyway, because I'm not sure how else to change things. I'm not sure how else to do it.
Now, since we're ending this thing, we appreciate your time. We really do. Is how can one follow your movement, your campaign, or get involved? What does someone do?
I'm sorry. You know what happened? My computer screen froze up on me while you were asking the question, Mike.
I was asking you. Sorry about that. What I was asking is, now that we've kind of wrapped this conversation up, first of all, we appreciate your time. greatly appreciated. Great answers. Hopefully our listeners and viewers can weed through it and determine who they want as mayors. How can someone follow your campaign or get involved or social media? How do they get a hold of you?
All right, so BissenMovement.com is our website, but I think if you were to put in Rick Bissen, Richard Bissen, Bissen for mayor, any of those cues would lead you to our website, our webpage. We have a presence on Facebook, on Instagram. Don't ask me too many technical questions. I'm the old guy who's just figuring out social media on my side, but yeah, we're very engaged. We have some people way smarter and a lot younger than me putting that, running all of that for our campaign. So we have a lot of information. We're always updating our posts and our information. Again, that's where people can find out where our meetings are, where our sign wavings are, our canvassing. We're working hard. Got a great team of people that are very dedicated to our campaign. So I just want to say thank you to them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Again, this is Richard Bissen, who's our mayoral candidate right now. And we're doing our interview of questions to see, some of the possible directions of the future of Maui County. And it was wonderful to hear your ideas and going forward. And I wish you the best in the election. Thank you so much, of course, to Byron Yap, being my co-host from Axia Home Loans. Byron, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
Just Byron Yap, work out of the Kihei branch of Axia Home Loans on Lipoa. And if you need anything, you can look us up online at axiahomeloans.com.
And I'm Clint Hansen with Maui Luxury Real Estate, and this is Maui Real Estate Radio. You can listen to this and all shows at mauirealestateradio.com or search for real estate at mauirealestate.net. Thank you for tuning in on the KAOI Radio Group. Aloha and have a great day.